Hello, and welcome to the Unconventional Path, entrepreneurship and innovation stories and ideas. This podcast is dedicated to exploring the journeys of successful entrepreneurs who might not be household names yet. I'm Bela Musits.
And I'm Mike Wasserman.
Mike, today our guest is Menil Vukovic. We had a great conversation about doing business across borders and cultures. We also talked about entrepreneurship in different parts of the world. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Well, Bela, as the resident German on this podcast, I am always excited to hear about international startups. So let's get right to your interview with Menil.
Menil, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Bella. It's good to be here.
Yeah. So where are you physically, geographically?
I'm in Sarajevo, which is the capital of Bosnia and Herzegovina. It's the southeast part of Europe, and very sunny today, actually.
Yeah, very good. And the company that you have started, or several of the companies you have started, have been located there.
Yes, I'm born and raised here. I've had many opportunities to leave the country, go work abroad, live abroad, but it never happened. And then the entrepreneurial spirit, the flames kept still brewing. So when there was an opportunity to start a company, I started it, and I didn't look at the geographical space at the moment. So I started them here, locally here in Sarajevo.
Yes.
All three of them technically.
Very good. And what type of businesses are they?
Mostly software. I've as far as I can remember, like even when I was a kid, I was a techie. I remember dreaming about having internet in my pocket, and this was way before smartphones, way before Wi-Fi, if I can even remember. And I was always fascinated by technology. So I started to be a telecommunications engineer, but frankly, I was always jealous of software engineers. Like it felt like they were doing the actual craft, like they were building something with their hands that they could see it, touch it, feel it, sell it, right? So as soon as I finished college, my first job was a software engineer, and there was always this desire to build products, sell products, to change the world, like any other young software engineer, and to make a meaningful impact, like socioeconomic impacts with the technology that we have. I never dreamt that we would be living in a truly technological area where that kind of job would be meaningful and we could actually make those changes. But I'm glad we did. I'm glad that we got here. So all three of my companies were tech.
Okay, very good. And were they tech companies that sold a specific product, or were you doing custom software development?
Both, actually. My first company was called Tinpu. It was a wordplay on Meetup. It was supposed to be sort of a social app, something like Tinder, but for sports or recreational sports, to be exact. We wanted to help people socialize and actually go away from their phones. So this was 2014, the era where social media apps were brewing, like at a peak level, I want to say. And it personally, I felt trapped in the same loop that everyone else was, which is doom scrolling, constantly interacting online with the people I care about, friends, family, acquaintances. But it felt like there was no human connection. There was no physical touch. There was no way to interact in the real world. So Timple was my first attempt at solving that. Me and my co-founder thought of starting with playing recreational sports or just grabbing a cup of coffee by matchmaking with people who are like-minded, who are a good match. So what we built was two mobile apps for Android and iOS that had an engine that was we used to call it matchmaking engine, but it was very similar to what games do today, where they try to figure out on several different data points who should be playing with based on skill level and different parameters. For us, it was the social level or the skill level if it was a recreational sport. We crashed and burned. It was our first startup. We were very, very young. We had no clue what we were doing. Like I think our first priority, was to register a company. Like that's what was in our heads. Like, let's do legal first. Let's make
Yes.
sure we have the papers and everything else covered, and then we started doing tech and everything else. So, but yeah, that was my first product company. Today I lead Pier Shadow, which is a custom software development company. We still do some of our own products in house that we mostly use in house, but sometimes once in every few years we try to build a product, release it into the world, see what happens, see if there's a product market fit for something like that. So I've been on, I want to say, both sides of that fence.
Yeah, very nice. So when you do custom software development, how do you find your customers?
That's a great question. I think that's a question that everyone's trying to solve these days, whether they're building a product, physical or digital, or just selling services. Like, how do you find your clients, where, and how do you find a good match? So for us, for me personally, I've been very fortunate that I had a lot of connections in US and Europe, because of my rich career and the opportunity that I've been given by other people to work on amazing products. And I want to say I always try to be the best possible engineer in what I do in my job, not just in the technical sense of word, but in a product sense of word. Right? I never looked at any piece of software through engineering lenses only. I always looked at them from a product and engineering standpoint. So this opened a lot of doors for me, and conversations with people which you usually don't get to see or connect with as an engineer. And these were usually my first clients. These were either my first clients or my referrals when I started the company. So very quickly, I had this small pool of clients that I started working with. Initially, I was alone. So I think that's worth mentioning. When I started the company, it was just me and not a single person for almost 6 months. And then eventually when I started hiring, it was, a necessity, obviously, and the fact that, my time is now split and I only have two hands, right?
Right.
But for me, it was referrals. And even to this day, I want to say like 70 to 80% of our funnel is based on referrals and good words, mostly from ex-clients or partnerships, and ex-colleagues. Like it's a variety of people that I've had the opportunity to connect with over the years, or work with, or both. Right.
Yes. So if you have a former client, um, how do you uh, engage with them to help you find new clients? Because that's sort of a delicate little balance there, and some people are much more open to that than others. Can you talk about how you sort of do that?
Um, True. So let's start by saying true. That is a little bit delicate. But from my personal experience, what I've seen, that the most delicate thing is actually understanding the culture that they're from. So it's very different working with someone that's US based versus someone that's Europe based. I think it is a culture shift. I always feel that I've had much easier time working with US clients because it seems the end goal was always aligned. It's creating more business, creating more revenue, pushing the goalpost forward, right? With European clients, it felt a little bit, more sensitive, a lot trickier, and there's always a little bit of, I don't want to say politics, but let's say other parameters to take into consideration. So these conversations are not always straightforward, though in my experience, it's easier to communicate if you're straightforward. So no matter, what kind of wall you're expecting or not expecting from the other side, it's much easier to communicate. So let me give you an example. So it's not just all theoretical. I did reach out to an ex-client a couple of months ago that's now US based. He was from Europe. He moved a couple of years ago in Canada and then to US. And I just wanted to grab a cup of coffee. So it wasn't necessarily business immediately, I thought of him. He was my CTO at the time when we were working together, and I love him as a person. So I said, let's grab a virtual cup of coffee, just to see like where you are, where am I at. I don't use social media, so I don't know what's happening with other people's lives. And this gives me a huge opportunity to actually truly connect with people. I don't have to scroll to see what they ate, where they were,
Right.
or what else has changed in their lives. And that for me has been thrilling for the last 10 years or so, since I cut off most social media. So I would grab a cup of coffee with him, and eventually business people start talking about business. Like no matter how long we haven't chatted together, it feels like we skim through life and go into business. And that's when I usually very transparent about my position, and I can say, hey, I have some capabilities to start working on something else. I have some bandwidth. My team can do this or that. These are the skill sets that we've acquired since we last spoke. Would this be interesting to you, some of your partners, friends, family, whoever, right? And these are the conversations that usually do lead to something tangible. So, and this is the easiest, obviously, approach, right? The harder one is just being blunt and just popping into your DM and saying, hey, I'm looking for more business. Can you refer me to someone? But
Yes.
obviously, it depends on the level of the friendship connection that you have with a single person. You can be blatant with someone, and you have to be a little bit more tactical with someone else, right?
Right. That's good advice. That's good advice and a great observation. So that brings me to another question about culture.
Mhm.
When you're working across various cultures, your company's global, you have customers all around the world. Um, what sort of advice would you have for someone who's starting a business or has a business and they're trying to expand globally? How do you sort of walk and learn about the cultural differences and how business is done in different countries and the social customs and social norms? How do you
Mm.
educate it in that?
That's a good question. Actually, there are two things that I've learned. They're very much related to this. One was by my dean at the college, who brought I think that was like 40 years ago at this point. There was a conference for engineering universities that he really wanted to attend, but he wasn't invited. The college wasn't invited. We weren't recognized at that point as a credible university. And he decided to go anyways. But obviously, you can't just walk through the front door. There's a you don't have the ability to do that. So instead, I think it was in London, he flew to London, I want to say 3 or 4 days earlier before the conference, and he joined the tennis club, and I want to say the golf club. I might be misremembering that. I know he's a great tennis player. So he took a couple of classes at the most elite tennis club that he could find. And the trainer told him, like, you seem to be good at tennis. Like, why are you taking tennis classes? Like, have you ever played tennis? And he said, I'm playing tennis for 40 years. I know my stuff. And he said, like, why are you here? And he said, to mingle, right? To find people who I need to speak with. So, and he did. Obviously, he found them within a few days. He started talking. He mentioned casually that he's a dean of the university, that's an engineering university, and they don't have attendance or clearance to attend that conference. And obviously, he got it, right? So for him, it was something. So what he taught me was that you actually sometimes have to physically appear, right? Even in this digital day and age, like we're talking online right now, so far away from one another, yet the human touch is still invaluable. And obviously, you can't force it. His experiment is a great story today because it was successful. It wouldn't be a story because if it wasn't successful, right? But I think it's the number of attempts that you do that makes this that you create these opportunities and then eventually capitalize on them. And that's something I actually did on my own as well. One of the clients I'm working with from Spain, a fintech company, we started talking online, just like you and me right now. And I've asked them if they have a headquarters, because they're a fully remote team, and they said, "Yeah, we're in Barcelona." I said, "Let's meet for coffee next week." And they were, "Are you close to Barcelona?" I was like, "No, I'm gonna sit on a plane, jump to Barcelona, have a cup of coffee, and go back." I spent a week in Barcelona, obviously, because it's beautiful. But that relationship turned into a 4-year deal partnership, and it's still ongoing. And I truly, honestly believe it would not pan out that way if I didn't just jump and go there physically. So, the human touch is still invaluable. As for how to learn about someone else's culture, well, you have to engage with someone else's culture as much as you can. Obviously, traveling is not a simple thing for everyone at every point. You can't visit 200 countries all at once, right? But you can target a specific country, go there, spend some time as much as you can, and then every other minute of the day, if you're not physically there, you can read about their culture. I remember 2016. I knew more about U.S. politics than I did about Bosnian politics, because for me it was so interesting. It was engaging. I read newsletters. I followed people who are native, who were born and raised in America, who had a voice in America, and I had the ability to actually learn about that culture. And then obviously when I started working, that's a treasure chest of culture learnings. Like, you actually interact with these people, so you can learn everything from them. So these are the two things I found that to be the best possible approach if you're actually targeting a specific region, country, even language, right? A language can be a target. So yeah, these are the two things. One that I learned so many years ago, and then the other one that just kind of came by.
Yeah. And given all the information that's available these days, if you're going to a specific country, there are, whether it be the tennis club or something else, there's ways that you can get engaged with that country, that culture, and the people, and then those connections will often lead to something else. As you were saying that, I was thinking about how I've had, I think, 10 different jobs in my career.
Wow.
At different companies, right? Different organizations, some of those which I started. But every one of those, except for one, was because I knew somebody. Just one of, and during my career, I sent out a lot of resumes, and I never got a job except for one. I did get one job from sending out resumes, but only one. So 1 out of 10. So if you want to play the odds, you're much better off getting engaged with individuals and having those relationships, because that's what leads to so many things in life.
I agree. I fully agree.
Let me ask you another question. So for a period of time, I did a lot of business in Japan for 2 different organizations. And what we used to do when we'd be entering Japan, particularly in the early days when we first were starting, we actually hired a local person to help us understand things and to make introductions, etc. And at least in Japan, I remember the U.S. Embassy actually had people who did that because they wanted to have commerce engagement. Have you ever used those types of channels?
I've used something very similar. These are people that are well connected, very social people usually, and sometimes it's not even formalized in the same way. Like what you've described seems very, very formal. What I've actually seen and interacted with was sort of an unofficial, informal way of doing these things. And yes, definitely, like, it's I want to make a comparison, but it's sort of like having a wingman, right? Someone that is much easier, has an easier time to break the ice, and also knows both parties, so he can actually do the introduction and say, oh, these two dots should be connected because it makes sense to connect them, right? But finding these people is not easy. Obviously, their job, if I can say that this is a job, is not trivial. Like they need to have a lot of these dots in their heads, and I think we all become these people. I don't want to say as we grow old, but as we gain more experience and we spend more time in an industry, like I feel like I've become sort of that person in recent times, because I've had so many people call me up and say, hey, this is what I'm looking for. Do you know a person? Do you know a company that can help me with? And vice versa, like someone calling up and saying, hey, I'm looking for a new opportunity or a new job. Would you know someone that that would hire me where I could be a great fit? And this is what I do. And doing this kind of matchmaking in your head is not easy. Like I try to write things down so I don't forget where, what, who, when. But for businesses, I think that's a great opportunity if you can keep that connection. But it's not, I wouldn't say it's a reliable funnel for a business. Like it's very much similar to referrals.
Yeah.
It's just that it's not a direct referral. There's a middleman in between. But I love the concept. I love being on both sides of that concept, honestly.
Yeah, very nice. Like I know here in the United States, every state, almost every municipality has some type of economic development organization. And part of their mission is to make connections. And so, those individuals are very familiar with what's going on within their geographic region. So it's often a way is to engage with them, and they can often make referrals and connections for you. And that's their job. And yes, that's a more formal relationship than the ones that you're talking about. But I think both of those are important. And because sometimes you say, okay, I want to expand my market geography. I don't even know where to start. Right. But my point is, there are places to start. For us, when we were going to Japan, it was the U.S. Embassy. If you're coming to the United States, there's economic development organizations that are doing that. So
that's
very
actually
good.
that's actually great. And I want to just backtrack for 1 second. I told you there were 2 techniques that I've learned. One was what Dean taught me on my first year at college. I never told you what the second was. The second was actually related to the first company I started building, and that's product market fit. We, especially as engineers, we get in our heads so easily. We fall in love with our products. We immediately think that we're changing the world, making it a better place. But most of the time, once we build a product, we have no idea what we're doing next. And I felt this, and this is my second point. I learned this the hard way. You can't sell into a market that you don't understand. So for Tinpu, the idea was, we're prototyping here in Bosnia. This is going to be just the MVP ground so that we can lift it up, make sure it works, gather some initial feedback, and then we're targeting Germany. Once we reach that point where we should actually start targeting Germany, we realize we have no clue about Germany. Like I know geographically where it is, but that's about it. I speak a little bit German, right? But we don't know the mindset of the people, the culture inside of the Germany. We don't have a liaison. We don't have a lawyer in Germany. We wouldn't know how to do taxes in Germany, right? So, breaking into a new market, in my mind, it's more about culture and should be more of a strategic decision, like 80% planning, 20% execution. And that's what I've learned with Tinpu. Like the second approach is, you can't really just jump in, both feet and say, oh, now I'm going to start working with Sweden, for instance. There's much more that you need to know, or you need to start traveling and meeting people over there and, getting that insight faster if possible.
Yes.
But yeah, those are the 2 approaches, 2 things I've learned. Like you can't jump into a market if you don't know it, and you can physically jump into it and start learning about it if you want to know more, right?
Right. That's a great point, because I remember when we were entering the European market, in some countries, what you needed to do was open a local office that was that was branded as your company. In other countries, you needed a distributor or an importer, and it just varied country to country.
Yeah,
And
there's
you needed to
there's a
know
lot of
which.
countries. Yeah, there's a lot of countries you need to know, like how to navigate through that, and that's just legal, right?
That's right.
And that's just level one. It's like starting into a market and then feeling the market, realizing, setting up prices. Like that's something that's always fascinating for me. How do you decide on a pricing tier for a certain country? How much analysis and math do you need to do to calculate these numbers? And
Right.
as you go on, there's more and more steps.
Right. And how do you take care of currency fluctuations?
Absolutely. That's
You price
a big
it? Right.
that's a big problem. I've seen that actually in the recent times. So I usually get offers. I use a lot of AI as much as probably anyone these days. But it's so funny when I get when I see differences with euro and USD, with the USD fluctuating,
Yes.
companies have started very quickly going back to euro, just so that they don't have to think about those fluctuations, like going
Right.
up or down. But yeah, you're right. A lot of things to consider.
So let's keep on this theme of different countries, different cultures. So we talked about, making connections. We talked about how to get your product in there or get your footprint established. But also sometimes you need to tailor the product to various different things in that country. Some of those could be legal things that you have to do things certain way. They have certain restrictions on data sharing, et cetera. That a lot of that stuff's been in the news. But also there's other things that just the way people engage with different products that you have to sort of understand because culturally it's different. What's your approach on that?
I still think the 80-20 rule stands. You need to be educated before you do anything. And I have a counter example. I used to work for a German fintech, 2017 to 2019. They became huge, and they started expanding. Each expansion to a new country inside of Europe, and Germany is part of the European Union. So we already had some things to cover even before the first release. Was very painful and very expensive. Not because we did the right preparation, but because we had a lot of mistakes. And every time we would jump into a new market, very quickly we would hear, oh, we're going to get penalized for this, penalized for that. We did that wrong. Oh, we can't do this. This is not the language that we can use. These are not the colors that we can use. For instance, we weren't ADA compliant in UK. Spain had to have different dialogues for users telling them that this is much closer to gambling because it's stocks than it's not, right? So each country was very hard to navigate because we jumped in head first. If we took the time to slow down and educate ourselves, try to find a local liaison, someone at least from the same industry that we can consult, right? Paying a couple of consulting hours would be much cheaper than all of these penalties that we got. So I understand that businesses move fast. Hot products move even faster. Like you want to keep the momentum, ride a wave, whatever you want to call it. But sometimes that speed can be super expensive. So I think that was the time where I became a fan of slowing down. Like not being the fastest is not usually what you're looking for. Yes, that's you can be the fastest once this is your sixth cycle of doing the same thing, right? If I started my sixth company today, I would want to be the fastest because I already know what I need to do. But doing something for the first time, it feels like you don't want to be the fastest. My best example is always Apple. It feels like they're lagging, but I think it's not. They're just strategically going second, but being better than whatever the first one did, and letting someone else, test the market, test the waters, regulate things, find out all of these quirks, issues, problems, whether it's again product, legal, pricing, whatever it is. They don't want to be the pioneers even though they probably could. There's no reason that, that,
Right.
that there's no reason for them to not do that. So I think it's about being aware of like what's your position. Are you going fast and understanding that speed can cost? The speed is actually can be very expensive. Or
Right.
are you going on a slower pace but making sure that what you did was right, correct, as much as you could, right,
Yes.
to the best of your abilities. So I started liking the slow approach, and it's not that much slower. It's just a little bit more tactical, a little bit more educated than just
Yes.
jumping in head first.
Yeah. I worked at General Electric early in my career, and this is a term that I picked up there. Because I worked in the R&D section of GE, and talk about being first. That's sort of what you do in R&D. You want to be first. And I can remember multiple times senior level executives say, "We are a fast follower. We're not
I
fast."
love that.
Right? So we let somebody else sort of cut the trees down and do all the hard work. And then when we see that there's an opportunity, then we can take advantage of our distribution, our channels, our size, and we can follow quickly.
That's
Right. So
awesome.
it was an
Fast
interesting
follower.
strategy. Yeah.
Yeah. A close second, right? A close
Yes.
second. That's an amazing approach. I never heard the term, but it feels very, very natural because, there is a cost of being first,
Yes.
especially in R&D. And then, someone offsets that cost if you're second, right? And you get the opportunity to invest more into everything else that they couldn't have afforded to do on their first swing, right? You're doing the second swing, you know what the pitcher is doing. So
That's right.
it's an amazing approach. I love it.
Yeah. Yeah. Let the other company make the mistakes.
True.
So let's talk a little bit about. Let me ask you a question first. I made a note here and I was reading it. Do you use remote teams, meaning you have individuals who are working for you scattered throughout the globe?
Yes. This is for me, remote work in this industry became normal in 2017. I never went back. So we officially still have headquarters. We have an office. People love to come to the office, enjoy mutual time. We never encourage them or discourage them on either side, right? So we let them tailor their working environment to themselves and to the best of their abilities so that they can be as productive as possible. So when we started Pier Shadow, I was very, very, um, I was very into working remotely. So I said, we will have headquarters and we will have space for every single individual in the company, no matter if they decide to come once a month or never. But we will, keep the feeling of a remote company still in sight. It's not easy. So the technical term is hybrid, right? We're a hybrid team because we do tend to see each other quite often. And then we still have a lot of engineers that are very remote and very rarely see each other in person. So communication is usually the trickiest and the hardest part in a remote or hybrid culture, but you have to be right oriented instead of speaking oriented when you need to push out an information, propagate something that's especially related to the whole company, right? So writing for me was always the best approach in anything. Writing feels much more superior to any verbal skills, right? So because I can write something down, I can search it, I can backtrack, I can go back and find it, feels like a superpower versus a verbal word that leaves my mouth and I can't really find it, capture it anymore. And obviously, trying to remember everything is barely possible, or closer to impossible these days with the information flow. So we were always a remote company. We were always adamant about documenting stuff, writing about it, And then if writing is too hard or takes too much time, then we rely on meetings. So we were never meeting heavy. We always light on those. We don't have daily stand-ups in a classical engineering way. Like, we don't do it in person. And I think we're doing good. Most of the team likes our approach. Yes, we miss some information here or there. We're not perfect, but I think, as time grows, our mindset is, is always tailored towards writing and leaving a paper trail, or a digital paper trail, right?
Yes.
And that gives us the opportunity to keep working remotely, go further away from each other physically, and still do good work, like still do quality work, be there on time, and deliver what needs to be delivered, right?
Very good. Excuse me. Do you use a specific tool to help you manage that? Something like Slack or some of those other tools that are available?
Yes, we're very default. There's no flavor in our communication tool, unfortunately. It's Gmail, it's Slack, it's Google Meet, it's Zoom. Very recently, we've had some clients that don't share our tech stack or communication stack, inside of our tech stack. So we started utilizing WhatsApp, which I didn't consider much of a business tool until recently, but it's still instant messaging, and it's still an opportunity to do fast communication. And that's what we usually do with our clients. Like, we want to be fast on time, and we want to make sure that they know what our needs are, and we can hear their needs as fast as possible.
Yes.
But yeah, so our stack is very default. Other than that, we do have a ticketing system that we built in-house last year. That's an experiment that we did, because everything else that we tried just didn't click for us. But other than that, it's like just basic, most common tools, especially Slack, and then connecting with our clients via Slack, so we can again communicate faster. But again, it always focuses, the focus is always on written communication first. If written communication is too hard, takes too long, then we do calls.
Right. So, I'm old enough that when I started working, there were paper copies, and it was literally a paper trail. So if you wanted to communicate a piece of information to 10 different people, you had to go to the copy machine, make 10 different copies, and then put that in the internal mail, and it would get delivered, the next day to 10 different people. And then I was at IBM, and they started their own internal email system. And all of a sudden, it was just as easy to send out that thing that you wrote to 100 people as it was. Actually, it was easier to send it to 100 people than it was to make, 5 paper copies. So all of a sudden, we would get at least I did, get inundated with copies of things that I did not need to know. And I had to sort through all of that. And it was a pain in the butt, quite frankly. And then it seems like email has sort of gotten better. People have, gotten away from copying everybody or reply all, which seemed to be the default in the early days. And then I started using Slack, and it was like deja vu for me all of a sudden. I was connected to all of these different things that, these different communication channels that I didn't know if I needed to read that or not. But the only way to find out was I had to read it. So how do you manage that? I guess how do you manage this huge flow of information that's coming across your desk?
That's a great question. I've been having a love-hate relationship with Slack since day one. I think I've seen the first beta in 2014. I wasn't impressed by Slack. It took over the world. I eventually adopted it. It's very hard to work without it these days, because it's very integrated. But I've felt the same thing. I am not old enough to remember internal mail, but I am old enough to remember a lot of spam email. that it's not spam, in a classical sense, but it's an unnecessary mail that's in my inbox.
Yeah, it's company spam.
It's company spam.
Spam from your fellow employees.
Yep. And you're right. The only way to know if it's relevant or not is to read it. I've seen so historically we've battled this by educating, right? So trying to teach all of our employees what's a must have, or what's a nice to have, what's a need to know and doesn't need to know kind of information, right? So for me, Slack was super polarizing for me. So there's two types of Slack channels. There's the infinite channel type of Slack workspaces, where you're in every single channel and they're all buzzing all day long, and it's a huge productivity killer. I felt it. I've fallen into that trap. I've gotten out barely. And there's another type of channel workspaces where it's all silence, and all of the communication is happening in DMs. For me, this second type of Slack workspace is worse. So if communication is hidden between two people in a DM, it's very hard to introduce a third person. By trying not to spam everyone else, you're withholding information, which feels worse, right? Again, for me, written word is the peak of everything, because I can search it. But if I never got that message, and I could never search it, I was never even aware that it existed. So spammy Slack, in my mind, is better than silent Slack, right?
Okay.
From a business perspective. Obviously, from a
Yes.
productivity perspective, the first one is horrible. And I've gone through this with most of my engineers many times over throughout the history of the company. We sat down, we intentionally tried learning like how a Slack message should look like. I know there's now Slack Messaging Academy, but I took the approach of email. Like, people still think of email as something that's very important. Like, when you sit down to write an email, it has to be concise, it has to be important, you have to include all the necessary people. Slack feels much more like messaging. Like, I'm just going to type hello and enter, which you would never do with an email, right? You would never send an email saying hello, right? So I thought that maybe we can adopt some of the concepts of an email, yet keep the speed of instant messaging that chat provides, or any kind of chat, like Slack in particular here, but any kind of chat. So instead of just saying hello, I would write the whole message, which is maybe a couple of sentences, and then hit enter. A couple of other tricks include tagging. Like, don't tag people if you don't really want them to see it. Don't tag at here, at channel, ever. In most cases, ever, right? If it's if the building is burning, then a channel is probably appropriate, right?
Yes.
But having this kind of writing culture inside of the organization that goes through all communication channels, like whether it's email, Slack, or any other type of tool, I think that helps, and people feel the difference. Like, if you're spammy, if you're hitting one word enter type of communication, they others will do the same to you, and you'll feel the wrath.
That's right.
You'll feel the wrath on the other side. So we intentionally teach our employees that they should respect other people's time, because then the other people will respect their time in return, right? And that respect starts with proper tagging, adding people to proper channels, and doing things in reverse as well. Like, if you see that you're not necessary in that channel for like 3 months, then there's a high probability you shouldn't be in that channel at all. Just leave the channel. Like, this is something that I've heard Elon Musk do is it Tesla or SpaceX or all of his companies, where he says, if you don't feel that you should be on a meeting, just get up and leave. I think the same approach goes with Slack as well. Like, if no one's tagging you for 3 months, you're not reading those messages, you shouldn't be in that channel. Just leave the channel. And I do that like seasonally. I want to say, like, at least 3 or 4 times a year. I remove myself from channels. I remove and archive channels that are not needed anymore. Like I cannot tell you, Bella, how many birthday channels we had before I started archiving them. Like some people would celebrate 2 birthdays, like one from last year and one from this year. At some point, you have no idea which channel should you open to write about, and get into arrangement about the gift for that year. So I think being, a little bit of diligent in that sense makes a lot in the long run. Um, Trying to keep things clean as you would, in any type of space, physical or digital. And notifications. God bless Slack notifications. There are so many options. There are so many things you can do to see, hear, and not see or not hear if you think you're irrelevant. My favorite option is mute everything unless someone tags me. Like maybe I miss the first few messages, if I'm needed, but eventually someone will tag me and I'll see that one and I'll understand, okay, let me backtrack now. So instead of reading 3 times a single message, I'm going to read once all 3 messages. So there is a way to battle that, but it's tips and tricks. It's unfortunately Slack is a productivity killer in my mind. No matter how much I use it, it always feels like that. And then there's the ultimate solution. Just kill the app, shut it down, put your phone in airplane mode. Like when you need deep focus, I think that is the best approach. And it feels like in today's world, we get less and less deep focus, each smaller sessions of deep focus every single day. Like I used to have 4 hours of deep work per day. Now I can't remember when was the last time I had 4 hours, like in one go. Maybe I can get 4 hours in a day, like in smaller chunks, 15, 20, 25 minutes, maybe 45 if I'm happy. And Slack is definitely one of the reasons. Like you start working in someone and you hear that sound, zing, ding, especially if you have multiple workspaces and multiple sounds, it's a huge nightmare.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because culturally, with all of these various different communication channels, sometimes our expectation is I want an instant response when I don't need an instant response. You can respond tomorrow. Because if you respond to it right now at the moment, or if you respond tomorrow, my action will be the same. It won't change anything. But we've gotten to sort of say, okay, we got to respond immediately. And as you were saying that, it reminded me of, again, I'm old enough to remember that when we used to travel, I used to travel with my boss when I first started working. And we would, there was no cell phones. This is back in the days when the only phone was a landline. And we would land at the airport to wherever we were going. And the first thing he would do is he'd find a payphone and he would call the office and he would say, Eleanor, what's going on? And her response was always the same. No, there's nothing, Joe. Everything's okay. And then we'd get to the hotel. And the first thing he'd do is he would call and everything was okay. So my point being is that 90% of the time, 99% of the time, that urgency is not really there. So you can, if you can discipline yourself, you can have these blocks of uninterrupted time. And it's really about discipline, self-discipline, to say, that's what I'm going to do. And it seems to be that's something that we have to learn or relearn.
I agree. As you were saying this, I thought like the equivalent of your boss today would be someone spamming a channel every few minutes and saying, is everything okay? Yes, I think you're 100% right. It is self-discipline. It is being mindful of other people's time so that they can be mindful of your time as well. Otherwise, you have to resort to these worst possible case scenarios where you shut down Slack. And you're right. I think the dopamine is affecting the whole planet in the same way. Like when we send a message, we expect immediate response, and that's, in my mind, that's maybe the biggest downside of Slack versus email. Like when you send an email, you never expect an immediate response.
Right.
Everyone has, I've talked to people, everyone has different expectations, like whether they expect a response within an hour or 24, but no one said immediately, right? for instant messaging, and I intentionally say instant messaging because Slack is very much similar to WhatsApp.
Same. Yes.
You expect that immediately because we're always on the phone, we're always connected. I dreamed of having internet in my pocket every single day. Now I have it. Now I don't want it anymore.
So it wasn't a dream; it was a nightmare.
It turned out to be a nightmare.
Yes.
If I could take it back, maybe I would. I mean, there's so much good, right? But the bad is wearing us down very slowly, methodically. It's hard to see it, but I've seen studies already around, like we're too far in not to observe these types of patterns of behavior. So I try to discipline myself on Slack as well. I try to add context if I do really need an immediate response. For instance, the client site is down. I would add tags and I would say this is an urgency. Like I would vocalize or write it down and say,
Sure.
guys, this is an urgency. I need an immediate response. And in 99% of the cases, I would start by organizing a meeting, because meeting is a real-time thing, right? We're not sending messages, you and me right now, asynchronous. This is something that's real-time because it makes sense to be real-time. Slack does not. Obviously, you can't communicate, once every 24 hours. That would make communication generally slow. But I don't think you should expect an immediate response. For me, something that I've realized is sometimes people feel that urgency, even if you're not creating it. So it comes from within. It's an internal thing, not an external thing. So if I do need something and I know that person will respond instantly and I don't need them to respond instantly, I'll actually schedule the message. Instead of sending them right now, I'll schedule it 2-3 hours in the future, because I know they'll immediately respond. And that's those 2-3 hours that I'm giving them back, knowing that at least I did not ping them for 2-3 hours. I did not disrupt
Yes.
their concentration,
Yes.
deep work. So again, you have to be, I think, tactical about how, when, what you send in these messages. I like open, transparent communication. That's the only thing I love about Slack is channels, especially public ones, where you can go in, see what you need to see, go out, leave immediately if necessary. I would love to have the opportunity to turn off DMs, honestly. Like for me, that's a way to kill productivity, because it's a notification that you'll almost always receive because it's targeted one-on-one. You never know if it's important or not. And the rest of the team can't really react to it, right? Because no one else sees it other than you and the person behind the DM. So complex thing in a complex world that probably requires discipline and self-discipline more than anything else. Like I think we know the correct answers. We just need to stick with them, apply them, and maybe treat it a little bit like email, and a little less like WhatsApp, right?
Yeah. We've become an interrupted system, an interrupt-driven system.
Interrupt-driven system. Yep.
Yeah. So my last topical area here, entrepreneurship. Can you talk a little bit about entrepreneurship where you are, and what the entrepreneurship ecosystem is sort of like, and sort of how it compares to other parts of the world?
Absolutely. This is a very, very interesting topic for me. This is something that I've talked about publicly and privately over the last decade or so. When I started my first entrepreneurial journey, I didn't understand that geographics matter. I'm a 90s kid. I grew up with TV, internet, smartphones. For me, world was always one giant country. I never truly felt the differences. I learned English very early as a kid, so I can communicate with the world over internet, and the internet was my country. That was my country and my planet. It was never Bosnia or Europe or something else. So entrepreneurship was the first lesson that unfortunately not everyone sees the things the way I do, and the opportunities are vastly different depending on where you're located. I felt that for the first time in 2018 at Web Summit, this was my first time. This was the first time I ever met a US VC. Again, same startup, recreational sports, or Tinder for recreational sports and companionship. And we pitched the idea. We were, I think we were still pre-product. Yeah, we were still pre-product. We pitched the idea, and they said, "Can we apply this to tennis in colleges in US?" We were like, "Sure, why not?" Like even easier, like one person searching for one instead of 6 people or whatever. And they said, like, "But would you relocate to US?" And our answer was a blatant no. Like, why would I do this? I'm building this, from the comfort of my home in my own country. Like, what's the difference if I relocate? Obviously, I learned much later that it's a political question. It's a geographical question, because if I would have moved to, I want to say Carolina, I think they were from Carolina, I would have some opportunities in Carolina that I don't have here in Sarajevo, right? And then over the years, I've learned that this wasn't level 1 and level 2. It's level 1 and level 6, where, for instance, Sarajevo would be closer to level 1, and level 6 would be something like San Francisco. Like, I don't think there's a higher level, especially for startups. So, in my mind, the true entrepreneurial spirit where startups start and live is San Francisco. And I don't think there's probably a better place on the planet to do that. So the opportunities over there seem to be much, much higher. The approach, the mentality, the people, and the conversations that you take all lead in the same direction. So I think it's much easier to find funding in San Francisco than it is in Sarajevo. And I'm not even going into legal differences and complications, and there are legal differences and complications in Europe and in Southeast Europe specifically. But the ecosystem around you shapes you into a way of thinking and gives you opportunities and opens doors, but also closes doors. So this is the part I had to learn the hard way, that sitting somewhere geographically closes doors. The only difference and the only thing that feels like the playing field is equal is for solopreneurs. I think solopreneurs can get away with playing, on an equal field, whether they're in Thailand, somewhere in Japan, Europe, or US. But as soon as you start scaling, you see the problem start scaling as well. So when it comes to Europe, I think we do have centers of entrepreneurship and startups that are great, like London, Berlin, Madrid, and maybe Barcelona. But it still feels like, and I started talking in levels, it still feels like these are levels 2, 3, maybe 4. Stockholm, potentially maybe level 5. And it still feels very pale in comparison to San Francisco.
Yes.
Obviously, it's much harder to build a startup in San Francisco because you're in a red sea of sharks, right? But I'd always choose. I'd always be the dumbest person in the room than the smartest person in the room. If I'm the smartest person in the room, I should definitely leave that room and find the one where I'm dumbest. It feels the same way. Yeah, it feels the same because I cannot grow, I cannot learn, I
Right.
can't teach others. It's probably, it's a bad quote. It's probably about what you want to do at a certain point in life, right? If you want to teach, you should be the smartest person in the room. But if you want to learn, you should be at least not the smartest person in the room, at least the second smartest. So for me, like, the US ecosystem feels much bigger. The market feels much more mature, especially when we're talking about SaaS. And the opportunities do feel like they're much, much bigger. Like the ceiling is higher, though the floor is also lower. So it's a higher amplitude probably that you're playing on, versus Europe that, there is a cap, of maximum and minimum. So it's very hard to, go away from that cap. And here's an example. I think Lovable was Lovable, 11 Labs. There's a couple of these newer unicorns that have popped up in the, I want to say, last 6 months. 11 Labs, Lovable is from Sweden, right? It's a Swedish startup. It's a Swedish unicorn. But if you actually read the fine print, it's Lovable LLC. So Lovable is no longer in Stockholm. So they grew from level 5 and they're now going towards level 6. They're moving to US. Whether they move their engineering or any part of R&D, any part of operations, it actually doesn't matter. What matters is what their footer says, how they represent themselves, what they say about themselves. Are they a Swedish company or they're an American company? And yes, companies tend to lose a part of their identity, a part of the patriotism, if you like, whoever has that these days. But they do, what's smarter for the business, which is moving towards where the customers are, where the market is at, and where they can sell their products. And I still think to this day that's, US dot. That's it.
Yeah, excellent. Excellent. Hey, that was a great way to sort of wrap up our conversation in this podcast episode. I really thank you for being on the podcast, Menil. It was a great conversation. I really enjoyed getting to know you. I hope
Likewise.
I hope our paths cross again in the future.
Likewise, and thank you for having me, Bela.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Well, Bela, that was really interesting. What were your main takeaways?
Yeah, I had several of them. I thought, as with many entrepreneurs, it's always interesting to talk a little bit about their journey. And his first business tanked. And I thought the way he described it was pretty good. I think I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but he said, I was the typical tech nerd with an idea. An idea is not a business. How many times have we all heard that? And I will tell you, the first business that I started, that described it perfectly well. And we went out of business. We learned from that. He learned from it, and try again. So that's the cycle, and it's okay. That's fine when it happens. Particularly fine when you learn something from it and you correct the things that didn't go well. So I thought the other interesting thing is, developing products for and selling in other countries and cultures. Lots of times you don't think about that, particularly here in the United States, where the United States market is really big. And, so lots of times when you're starting a business, you're thinking just locally or regionally or maybe in the United States. And I'll tell you, with Integrated Surgical Systems, which was the robotical surgical company that I founded, we first focused on United States, and then we entered the European market, and first with a couple of beta sites. And not only were the regulations different in different countries, meaning, what the plug is on the equipment that you plug into the wall, but also medical device regulatory things were different. The way that surgery was done from a process perspective was very different. There were different people involved. So understanding all of those things, which we did not do a very good job at in the beginning, cost us some time and cost us some money, because we had to modify our product to make it work within that different country, in those different countries. So really important to sort of figure that out. And, going to that country, meeting people, which is one of the things Menil talked about. We didn't do that in the beginning. We did that. Okay, we're ready to enter the European market. We got on an airplane, and it was too late. The product was already designed. So we had to go back step and sort of do some things over again. So I think that's really important. The other thing that I thought he mentioned that was really neat was this notion of, if you go there, you meet people, you develop connections, and then those connections lead to other connections. And it's such a valuable lesson to how business is done. And so many of the things that I've had the opportunity to do were enabled because I knew somebody. I knew somebody I could call. I knew somebody I could ask some information about. So anyway, I thought those were the key takeaways for me. What did you think, Mike?
Totally agree, Bela. And, again, even simple things like how you negotiate a contract, right? Or how you greet somebody, or do you just sit down to the table, or you need to go have a meal or a coffee with somebody? These are so different. So instead of maybe echoing the things that you said, I'm going to take a slightly different approach, because a thought struck me based on some conversations that I've had just in the last few days. But I think there's some really cool lessons here. A lot of young people, students, former students that I've been talking to are concerned or even scared about, there's these kind of two tidal waves right now that I think people feel are crashing over them. One is AI, right? And artificial intelligence taking your jobs, or taking away your livelihood, or taking control over things that you were used to being in control over. And then all this global turmoil, whether it's wars or political division or whatever, right? Natural disasters on the other. And I think a lot of people are feeling overwhelmed at all these things happening at one time. And if you're getting your university degree, or you're on the job market right now, or you're thinking about quitting your job to start a business, I think all these things are weighing on people. And I have a lot of empathy for that. And I think about the same things myself a lot. But I think what you and Menil talked about actually is really relevant. And I think that, the discussion about being flexible and responsive to technical realities and to change, and geographical and cultural differences is the path forward. Change is really hard, but by being flexible and responsive to the fact that things are going to be different, whether it's people or tech, right? Both the worlds that he inhabits, right? It'll be okay, right? Get to know people intensely, right? Build both your technical and your people skills, and opportunities will come from that. Opportunities always have come from that, whether it was the Industrial Revolution in the early 1900s, or post-World War II, kind of the rise of large factories in the automotive industry and things like that, or computers, or the internet, or smartphones, right? The waves are getting closer together and probably faster, but there's been these disruptions. But I think the secret to everybody is that to get through in all of these waves was your network will get you through it, right? So get to know people, and by being responsive to change, you can always learn new things. You just need to be open to the fact that, yes, I need I need to teach myself new things, and find the people or the places where you can learn that stuff. I think all these things are manageable skills if you break them into these little parts. And it all starts with what you and Menil were talking about, I think, in terms of kind of being aware of your situation, knowing that things are different, and then getting to know people who might be able to help you through it. So I think this was a great story, actually, about living at the intersection of technology and culture. And all we're living through right now is, as scary as it is. Granted, there's lots of people dying in wars, and I'm not talking about that. But in the U.S., anyways, right, and here in Western Europe, all that is this is another wave of technical and cultural change. All right, and the way through it is to be aware of it and take action, to build your network and to learn. So I think that's a cool way to interpret some of the things, or apply some of the lessons that Menil was talking about. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I think you bring up some good points there, Mike. And I think the one I want to emphasize a little bit is this notion that when you do business internationally, you need the visitor, the person coming to that country or that region, needs to understand and accept the culture and the way things are being done there. Trying to come in like a bull and say, this is how we're going to do it, most of the times you're not going to find great success. The other thing I'll mention, again, this is some of it's based on my experience, is each country culture does things differently, especially at a business level. The way businesses are incorporated, the way business is done. And so that's important to understand that. So having a person who's from that region, from that country, who understands that and knows how to structure businesses. For example, I recall in some countries in Europe, the only way you could sell a product there was you had to have a distributor. You could not sell direct. You had to have a distributor. In other countries, the way you could sell there was you had to open up an office. You had to have employees. And then those people could sell, but they had to be your employees. Employment laws in countries are very different. So they might not be the same type of employment laws we're used to here in the country that you're from. So again, understanding the scope of all these various different changes, and then and knowing that that's, if you want to do business there, that's how you got to do business. You're not going to change it. So embrace it and find some experts who can help you not make mistakes, and you'll be successful. And I think the other piece is this notion that I thought was interesting that Menil said, was that 70 to 80% of his business is from referrals. That is, that's a nugget right there. That tells you something about how business really works. So those were my final thoughts. Mike, you have anything final you want to share?
I think maybe a good takeaway for this is, if you get the chance in the next week, all the listeners, right, and you get an opportunity to meet somebody with a different culture, make an effort to share a cup of coffee or a cup of tea or whatever and learn something from them. Like just today, I met a really interesting master's student from Pakistan, and she's studying visual anthropology, which I didn't even know was a thing, right? And she's probably 24 and I'm 58, and we spent 20 minutes having a coffee, and I learned a ton, right? Not only about visual anthropology, but about Pakistani culture and language and food and all kinds of stuff. And I shared with her some of the things that I've learned about being an immigrant in Germany from the US. So I go for it. If you get the opportunity, people, this week, do it. Because I feel like a lot of times we will walk past people who are different from us and not take the time to get to know them, right? And she actually said she felt like that, just overlooked a lot of times. And I've seen that. So I think that's a good challenge for the listeners to take it on. Somebody from a different culture, meet them, talk to them, learn from them. But that's what I got. What do you think? Should we wrap it up, Bela?
Yeah, I think it's time to wrap this one up, Mike.
All right. Well, thank you, Bela, for another great guest and a great interview. And listeners, thanks for joining us for another episode today. We hope you found it interesting and thought-provoking, just like we did. And as always, if you have questions about what we've discussed today, please feel free to get in touch with us. Our email is bela.and.mike@gmail.com.
Hey, and finally, if you enjoyed the podcast, please hit that subscribe button, whether you're watching this on YouTube or on your favorite podcasting app. If you subscribe, it moves us up in the rankings, and it makes it easier for other people to discover this podcast. For those of you watching on video, you might notice a different background. So I'm going to say goodbye from my sailboat here in Narragansett Bay in Rhode Island. So see you all soon.
And from over here, still in Münster, Germany, at my desk, Bela, enjoy the sailing. I wish you smooth waters and fair winds, and we'll see everybody next time.